Your brother needs 3,000 a month, she said, as if it were the most natural sentence in the world. For a moment I just stared at the phone on my kitchen counter, its screen glowing with her name. Morning sunlight pooled across the tiles, touching the cup of black coffee I hadn't tasted yet. Outside, a lawnmower droned, steady and distant. Inside, my mother's voice filled the silence. The same voice that once told me I'd ruin my life chasing a dream instead of finding a husband. What would you do if the people who mocked your dreams came crawling back for help? Don't skip this one. Her silence became the loudest revenge of all. She didn't even start with, hello. Just straight to business. Straight to him. I took a slow breath. 3,000. I repeated softly, pretending to think. That's a very specific number. Her sigh came sharp through the speaker. You know your brother isn't good with finances. You're doing well now. You can help. Doing well. That was her new phrase for the company she once called a foolish hobby. As she spoke, I glanced at the framed Forbes 30 under 30 article hanging near my desk. My name gleamed beneath the headline, Gray Media Founder Shatters Industry Expectations. It had been 6 months since that article. 6 months since the calls from investors, reporters, and everyone who once avoided me. Everyone, except her. Until today. I turned off the stove and leaned against the counter, her voice still going. He's your brother, she said in that soft sweet tone she used when she wanted something. Family helps family. Does it? I asked, smiling to myself. My mother didn't notice the edge in my voice. She rarely did. She kept talking, about bills, rent, how times are hard. She mentioned his name over and over as if repetition might force compassion into me. But all I could think of was the night I called her 5 years ago, crying quietly in my tiny apartment, asking for $300 to keep the lights on. Her response then was sharp and simple. You chose this path. Live with it. And she hung up. Now she wanted 10 times that amount. Monthly. Mom, I said finally, interrupting her list of justifications. Why didn't he call me himself? There was a pause. He's embarrassed, she said. You know how men are. It's hard for him to ask. I laughed. Not loud, but the kind of laugh that escapes before you can stop it. Funny, I said. It wasn't hard for you to ask on his behalf. Her tone shifted. Don't be sarcastic. We raised you better. That word always felt like a lie. My father passed years ago, quiet and gentle, the only one who ever believed I'd make something of myself. After he was gone, we became just her rules, her favorites, her silence. I walked to the living room window. My neighborhood was still. Children's bikes tipped over, sprinklers clicking. A normal morning. Yet inside me a slow fire lit. $3,000, I murmured again, watching a leaf fall. Do you know what that would have meant to me once? What are you talking about? Nothing, I said quickly. My voice softened. Tell me more about his situation. And she did, eagerly, as if she'd won me over. His failed business, his overdue payments, the house he almost lost. Each word poured from her mouth like excuses rehearsed too many times. I stayed quiet, letting her believe I was listening with sympathy. But in truth I was remembering every word she once said about me. You'll never make it in that field. No one listens to girls with unrealistic dreams. Why don't you learn something practical? Each insult had carved a place inside me, a place I'd built my company from. When she finally paused, expecting my promise to help, I asked calmly, Do you remember the last time I called you for help? Silence. Even over the phone I could hear her confusion or maybe fear. I remember it, I continued. It was raining. My power was cut off. You said, learn your lesson, Lena. Do you remember that? Why are you bringing that up? She snapped. That was years ago. Exactly, I said. And yet here we are again. Someone asking for help, someone refusing. The line went quiet. For a long moment neither of us spoke. The clock ticked on the wall behind me, each second louder than the last. Then she broke the silence. You're being cruel. Don't punish your family for old mistakes. I looked at my reflection in the window, the faint outline of a woman she barely knew. Old mistakes, I said softly. Or patterns. I could have ended the call there. But something in me wanted her to hear what she had created, not with violence but with distance. You know, I said, I once thought success would change how you saw me. Oh, stop being dramatic, she interrupted. We're proud of you. Your picture is everywhere. People in church talk about you all the time. Do you tell them you haven't spoken to me in 2 years? I asked. Her breath caught. That's not fair. No, I said. It's just the truth. I moved to my desk and opened my laptop. A folder labeled Gray Family Ledger blinked on the screen. Something I'd created quietly last year when I started noticing small financial ties between my company's clients and my brother's ventures. He'd been living off my contracts without knowing it. That was my hidden advantage. I didn't plan it, not at first. But when I saw his name pop up in payment chains, I didn't stop it either. I simply observed. Let patterns form. Let debts accumulate. Now, hearing her plea, everything fit neatly together. Lena, my mother said, her voice softer now, pleading. You've made it. You have no idea how proud we are. Your brother just needs a little help to get back on his feet. Back on his feet. He'd always been on his feet, standing on the shoulders of everyone else. I'll think about it, I said finally. That's my girl, she said quickly, relief flooding her tone. I knew you'd understand. Oh, I understand, I murmured. Better than you think. Before she could answer, I ended the call. The screen went dark. For a long time I stood there, not angry, not sad. Just quiet. Outside, the mail truck passed by, the engine low and steady. A faint breeze moved through the curtains. I realized then that she hadn't called to reconnect, she'd called to collect. And yet, somewhere deep inside, I wasn't broken by it. I was focused. I walked to my desk again and opened the Gray Family Ledger folder. One click revealed a line of transactions. Subtle, intertwined, invisible to anyone not looking closely. His company owed mine. He didn't even know it. I leaned back, eyes tracing the numbers. Each invoice was another thread in a quiet web I'd been spinning without meaning to, or maybe I always meant to. Maybe part of me had known this call would come. That thought made me smile. The kettle clicked off behind me, steam rising in slow spirals. I poured the coffee I'd forgotten, its warmth grounding me back in the present. Then my phone lit up again, her name flashing once more. This time I answered on speaker and said nothing. Lena, she asked. I forgot to mention, can you send it by Friday? Her tone was casual, almost cheerful. Like this was just another chore to check off her list. I stared at the laptop screen, at the unpaid invoices under my brother's name. My voice came out calm, almost kind. Friday, I repeated. Sure. I'll handle it. She sighed with relief. You're a good daughter. I try to be, I said. Then I hung up, again. Only this time I didn't stand still. I drafted a short email to my finance manager. Suspend account 471. Client under review. It was a single keystroke. Clean, untraceable, final. I sat back and whispered to the empty room, you'll learn what silence feels like. The phone stayed quiet for the rest of the day. Evening came with a soft orange light over the horizon. I made dinner, washed the same plate twice and felt nothing. No guilt, no regret. Only clarity. By the time the streetlights flickered on, I'd already drafted a note in my planner. Dinner with Mom next week. A meeting I would attend not to mend but to begin. The call she never expected had finally come full circle. Only now it wasn't hers. It was mine to make. And when I did, she would finally hear what being ignored sounded like. Silence has a strange weight to it, heavier than anger, sharper than any word. That night, it filled my house like a quiet fog. My phone stayed face down on the counter, its black screen reflecting the lamp's dim glow. No calls, no apologies. Just stillness. And for the first time in years, I didn't chase it. I didn't check for messages. I didn't reach for closure. I'd spent half my life trying to explain myself, to be understood, to be forgiven for dreaming too loudly. Now, silence had become my armor. And oddly, it felt powerful. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. Old habits. Even after success, I still started each day like I did in those struggling years. Coffee first, then emails. But this time I wasn't just reading reports. I was tracing patterns. On my screen glowed a chain of unpaid invoices, each connected to a small local business my company worked with. And there it was again. My brother's name buried inside the transaction list. He wasn't just struggling. He was using shell accounts tied to clients under our advertising network. Quietly. Sloppily. And it had gone unnoticed until now. I stared at the numbers, heartbeat steady. This wasn't coincidence. This was survival, his kind of survival built on others' backs. By noon, my office filled with light. My assistant, Clara, knocked gently on the door. "You wanted me to flag recurring account anomalies?" she asked, holding a tablet. "Yes," I said. "Start with the local vendor list. Last 6 months." He scrolled quickly. Found a few overlaps. Some accounts lead back to... He paused, squinting. "A Greyline Creative. Ever heard of them?" I smiled faintly. Greyline. The name sounded like a joke. A lazy imitation of my company's own. "Flag it," I said. "Put it on hold." Clara hesitated. "Should I contact the owner?" "No," I replied softly, closing my laptop. "Not yet." That afternoon I went for a walk around the lake near my house. The wind smelled like wet leaves and faint smoke from distant fireplaces. I watched families feeding ducks, couples holding hands, teenagers with earbuds and laughter that carried through the air. They all looked so ordinary, unaware of the war some of us fight behind calm faces. I thought of my mother again, her calm tone, her entitlement, her years of silence that now mirrored mine. And I realized something chilling. Silence isn't just the absence of noise. It's a kind of language. One that says, "I'm no longer explaining myself to you." That realization changed everything. Back home, I opened an old folder. One I hadn't touched since the early days of gray media. It contained screenshots of messages I'd once sent to my mother. Unanswered texts. Emails about small victories. All ignored. Now, in their place, I was collecting a new kind of message. Records, transactions, and quiet leverage. One document stood out. A contract my team had drafted last quarter for a marketing partnership. The secondary partner's name, Greyline Creative. Signed by Michael Gray. My brother. He hadn't just built a business like mine. He'd built it through mine, siphoning client relationships behind my back. For a long time I just sat there staring at his signature. I should have been angry. But I wasn't. I was calculating. The next day I called my CFO, David. "I need a private review of our subcontractor accounts," I said. Discreetly. He paused. "Are we investigating fraud?" "Not exactly," I said. "Just verifying loyalty." I could hear him typing. "You sound different." "Focused," I corrected. "Just focused." When the call ended, I leaned back in my chair, hands folded. Every move I made now had to be precise. Revenge isn't about emotion. It's about timing. By the end of the week, Clara returned with a quiet knock. "You were right," she said, sliding a folder onto my desk. "Greyline's been using your company's back-end data to pitch your own clients. And guess who signed the authorization request 3 months ago?" I flipped through the pages. My chest tightened for a moment, not from shock but from the sheer audacity. There it was, signed by Eleanor Gray, my mother. I stared at her name, bold and unapologetic. She hadn't just defended him, she'd helped him. The dots connected themselves. When she called asking for money, it wasn't desperation. It was manipulation. They knew something had been discovered. They wanted to fix it before I did. I closed the folder gently. "Thank you, Clara," I said. "Leave this with me." She lingered, studying my face. "You okay?" "Yes," I said. "Just remembering." That night I sat in my backyard with a cup of tea and the sound of crickets thick in the air. The moon hung low, reflecting off the surface of my pool like a quiet mirror. I thought of my younger self, the girl who begged for a chance, who believed success would make people love her. How naive she had been. Now success wasn't about love. It was about power, the quiet, steady kind that doesn't need to scream. And silence, that was the key. Not confrontation, not chaos, just quiet execution. A few days later my phone buzzed again. Her name. I didn't answer. Instead I watched as her message popped up. "Honey, just checking in. How are you? Did you get my voicemail?" Voicemail? I hadn't even listened. When I finally did, her voice came through smooth as silk. "Hi sweetheart, just wondering if you managed that transfer for your brother. He's really struggling. You wouldn't want him to lose his business. Family should stick together." I smiled to myself. Family should stick together. They were sticking to me like parasites. The next morning I replied with a simple text. "I'll handle it. Don't worry." She wrote back immediately, "Thank you, darling. You've always been the strong one." Strong. That was new. Once upon a time, strong had meant stubborn. Now it meant useful. And that's when I knew they hadn't changed. They were just dressing old manipulation in polite words. By Friday, my plan was quietly in motion. I authorized the routine review across all shared vendor accounts, knowing it would trigger immediate financial holds on Greyline's contracts. Within 24 hours, my brother's company accounts froze. That night, my phone rang again, his number this time. I let it go to voicemail. When I finally listened, his voice cracked between anger and panic. Lena, something's wrong with our systems. Our funds are locked. I think it's a glitch with one of your client networks. Call me back. I didn't. I simply forwarded the voicemail to my private folder labeled Phase 1. But even in silence, guilt tried to crawl back in. That evening, I made soup, the same recipe my father used to make when I was anxious. I sat at the table, spoon halfway to my mouth, wondering if he'd be proud of me or disappointed. Then I remembered how my mother used his name to justify everything. Your father would have wanted you to help your brother. She never mentioned how my father was the one who gave me his old laptop when everyone laughed at my idea. No, I decided. He'd understand. He'd see this not as cruelty, but as correction. The weekend passed quietly. No calls, no messages. Then Monday morning the storm hit. Claire rushed into my office breathless. Greyline's legal team just emailed. They're demanding to know why their accounts were frozen. Send them our audit policy, I said calmly. They're hinting at filing a complaint, she added. I smiled. Let them. Because what they didn't know was that every contract, every dollar, every breach of ethics they'd made, was documented. By me. For months. That afternoon I finally returned my mother's call. She sounded relieved, like a patient hearing the doctor finally picked up. Oh, sweetheart, I've been so worried. Your brother's company is in trouble. They say someone froze their accounts. Can you do something? Kept my voice even. I'll look into it. Please hurry, she said, desperate now. He's falling apart. I nodded slowly. I understand. It's terrible when people suddenly stop helping you, isn't it? She went quiet. I'll get back to you, I added and ended the call. That night I slept peacefully. No tossing, no guilt. The silence that once haunted me now served me. And somewhere deep down I realized, this wasn't revenge. Not yet. This was just the beginning of understanding how power really worked. Because power wasn't loud. It didn't beg or explain. It waited. Quietly. Patiently. And when it finally spoke, it didn't raise its voice. It whispered and the whole room listened. And soon they would listen. Not because I shouted, not because I demanded to be heard, but because everything around them began to crumble in silence. The first sign came 2 mornings later. Clara walked into my office holding her phone, her expression uneasy. You should see this, she said, placing it on my desk. On the screen was a local business blog headline. Greyline creative faces sudden financial suspension, clients left in limbo. I read it slowly, feeling neither guilt nor satisfaction. Just inevitability. Things like this don't happen overnight. They build thread by thread, choice by choice, until the whole fabric gives way. Should we issue a statement? Clara asked quietly. I shook my head. No. Let them speak first. By noon the phones in our office began to buzz. Clients calling to confirm their contracts were safe. Suppliers checking on delayed payments. I answered each with calm assurance. Grey Media remains fully operational. The confusion isn't on our side. The more I said it, the clearer it became. This wasn't damage control. It was revelation control. For years my family had treated me like the unstable one, the dreamer chasing storms. Now I was the calm in the middle of theirs. That evening I drove to the old neighborhood, the one I hadn't seen in years. The roads felt narrower, the houses smaller. I parked outside my mother's gate, still chipped with the same paint I used to scrape during chores as a girl. Lights glowed from the kitchen window. Shadows moved inside, hers, his. The air smelled faintly of wet earth and jasmine. For a long time I sat in the car watching. My brother walked out to take a call, pacing like a man cornered. His voice carried, sharp, panicked. I couldn't make out every word, but one sentence reached me clear as glass. I swear I didn't know she'd notice. My chest tightened. He knew. I started the engine and drove away before they saw me. The next morning a new headline appeared. Gray line under investigation for contract misrepresentation. The comments section was ruthless. People who once admired their family-run creativity were now dissecting every rumor, every financial flaw. I didn't need to do anything. Silence was doing the work for me. But not everyone understood that. That afternoon my phone rang. Her name again. I answered this time. Lena, she said breathlessly. Everything's falling apart. They're saying awful things about your brother. This isn't fair. I listened quietly, letting her panic fill the air. He's worked so hard, she continued. You have to help. You have connections. People respect you now. There was again the shift. The moment her desperation turned into expectation. I didn't respond right away. I let her hear the hum of my silence. Finally I said, Mom, I told you before, I don't interfere in other people's mistakes. This isn't a mistake, she snapped. It's a misunderstanding. Maybe, I said softly. But misunderstandings still have consequences. She went silent. And for a second I could hear her breathing, uneven, furious. You've changed, she said finally. You're cold. I smiled faintly. No, Mom. I just stopped apologizing for being right. Then I ended the call. That night I couldn't sleep. Not because of guilt, but because of memory. I kept seeing flashes of the past. The nights I stayed up writing proposals while she watched TV. The way she used to say, "You're wasting your youth behind that screen." And the quiet satisfaction on her face when I almost gave up. It wasn't hate I felt now. It was distance, the kind that no bridge can close. I got up, made tea and stood by the window as rain began to fall. The sound was steady, comforting, like applause from the sky. I whispered to myself, this is what silence sounds like when it wins. A few days later, David, my CFO, came to see me. He carried a brown envelope and an expression that told me something new had surfaced. They're trying to move funds, he said. Grayline's frozen assets are being rerouted through a secondary company, Eleanor Holdings. The name hit like a familiar chord. Eleanor. My mother. I looked through the documents. She'd created an account months ago, likely thinking it would never be traced back to her. But numbers have a way of talking when people don't. Should we press charges? David asked. I shook my head. No. Not yet. Let them make one more move. He hesitated. You're sure? Yes, I said. They're digging their own hole. I just need to make sure it's deep enough. That weekend I went grocery shopping, something I hadn't done in a long time. I needed the normalcy. The store was quiet, the shelves lined neatly. A young woman at the counter smiled as she bagged my things. You're Lena Gray, right? She asked suddenly. From Gray Media? My husband follows your work. You really built all that yourself? I nodded, a little surprised. I did. She smiled wider. My mother always says, a daughter's success is the best revenge. Guess she's right. Her words stayed with me the entire drive home. By Monday my brother's name was everywhere. Not in headlines this time, but in whispers. A former employee leaked emails showing he'd used client funds for personal expenses. The story spread like wildfire. I didn't share it, didn't comment, didn't even smile. Because revenge loses its dignity when you celebrate it. Instead, I focused on work. Approving campaigns, meeting deadlines, acting as though nothing outside my office existed. But inside, I knew everything was shifting. One evening, Clara entered my office quietly. Your mother came by, she said. She's waiting in the lobby. I froze for a second, my hand hovering above my keyboard. It had been over 2 years since we'd last seen each other in person. Send her in, I said finally. When she walked in, I barely recognized her. The confident posture was gone. Her hair, once meticulously styled, hung loose. She clutched her purse like a lifeline. Lena, she said, her voice trembling. Please, help us. They're taking everything. The bank froze the house account. We could lose everything your father built. My father built? I repeated. Or the house you used to remind me I didn't belong in? Tears filled her eyes. I was wrong. About everything. Please don't punish your family like this. I stood slowly, feeling the weight of years between us. I'm not punishing anyone, I said calmly. I'm just not saving people who wouldn't save me. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She just looked at me, truly looked, as if seeing me for the first time. And in that moment I realized something. Her fear wasn't of losing money. It was of losing control. I walked around my desk, stopping beside her. "You taught me that silence means weakness," I said softly. "But you were wrong. Silence is power, you just never learned how to use it." She turned to leave but paused at the door. "You'll regret this," she whispered. "Maybe," I said. "But not tonight." After she left, I sat in the dark office for a long time. Rain began again, tapping softly against the windows, rhythmic, almost peaceful. I thought about regret, about the price of peace. Then I remembered her last words and smiled. People like her always mistake peace for guilt. They can't imagine quiet without fear. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I was prepared. Because something told me, this fall wasn't over yet. They still had one move left to make. And I was already waiting for it. They made their move the very next evening. The message came just before sunset. Short, polite, almost harmless. "Dinner at home. Just family. Sunday at 7. No names, no apologies, no explanations. Just an invitation wrapped in civility." After everything that had happened, it read more like a challenge than a gesture of peace. I stared at the text for a long minute, then simply typed back, "I'll come." Not out of curiosity but closure. For days I had imagined how they might crawl back, but I never pictured they'd do it over a dinner table. A fitting choice, really. That house had seen every stage of my humiliation. It was only fair it now witnessed theirs. When Sunday came, the sky wore a heavy gray. Rain threatened but didn't fall, as if even the clouds were holding their breath. I chose my outfit carefully. Simple, quiet power. A black dress. No jewelry, no makeup beyond what civility required. I wanted them to see the woman they'd dismissed, but without the armor of wealth. I drove in silence. The streets grew familiar, the turns automatic. My father's old house appeared like a ghost from another life. Same cracked porch, same dying rosebush near the gate. Only now it looked smaller. Like their authority had finally shrunk to the size it always deserved. When my mother opened the door, her smile trembled. "Lena," she said softly. "You came." I said I would. Behind her, the smell of roasted chicken filled the hallway, nostalgic, almost cruel. For years that smell had meant comfort. Tonight it felt staged. My brother stood near the dining table, collar unbuttoned, pretending calm. The sight of him made something twist inside me. Not hate, not even anger. Just recognition. We had the same eyes, the same stubbornness. The only difference was what we'd done with it. "Lena," he said finally. "It's been a while." "Long enough," I replied. Dinner was already set. A spread that spoke of effort. Mashed potatoes, salad, my father's favorite casserole. The tablecloth was the same one my mother used every holiday, pressed neatly as though this were another celebration instead of a silent trial. We sat in that old ritual, plates clinking, small talk about nothing. The clock ticked louder than their words. No one mentioned the headlines. No one said the word gray line. Finally, my brother cleared his throat. "I just want to say, I didn't mean for things to go that way." "Which way?" I asked gently. He looked down. The contracts, the overlap. It wasn't personal. I thought we could both benefit. "You mean," I said, "you thought you could use me without asking." My mother's fork paused midair. "Let's not start this." I turned to her. "You invited me. Let's finish it properly." Her face stiffened. "We didn't invite you to fight. We invited you to talk like a family." "Family," I repeated, smiling faintly. That word does so much heavy lifting in this house. She set her fork down. "We're still your blood, Lena. Mistakes or not." I leaned back in my chair. "Then tell me, was it a mistake when you signed your name on Eleanor Holdings?" The color drained from her face. She blinked rapidly, trying to hide the panic. "You don't understand how business works." "Oh, I understand perfectly," I said. "I understand you tried to move stolen funds under a name that wouldn't trace back to your son. But you forgot one thing. The woman you dismissed built the system you used." The silence that followed was thick enough to taste. My brother finally spoke, his voice breaking the tension like cheap glass. "You're really enjoying this, aren't you?" "Enjoying?" I said quietly. "No. Just witnessing balance." He slammed his napkin down. "You think you're better than us because you made some list? Because you've got money now?" I met his glare steadily. "No, Daniel. I think I'm different because I built mine without stealing someone else's. He stood up, angry now. You could have helped. You should have helped. We're family. I stayed seated, calm. You didn't want family when I was sleeping on the floor of a one-bedroom apartment. You wanted witnesses when I failed. My mother rose then, voice trembling. That's enough, both of you. We can't undo the past. I turned to her. You're right. But we can live with the results. For a while no one spoke. The rain finally began, soft at first, then steady, tapping against the windows like applause from the dark. My brother sat down again, quieter. My mother refilled her glass with shaking hands. Almost pitied them. Almost. I didn't come here to fight, I said finally. I came because I wanted you to see something. They both looked at me warily as I reached into my bag and pulled out a slim brown folder. I placed it on the table the way one places a final card in a long game. What's this? My mother asked. Documentation, I said. Every loan, every fake invoice, every client transfer you approved or benefited from. All under review. Gray Media's legal team owns the rights to every network your company ever touched. My brother swallowed hard. You're turning on us? I shook my head. You turned on yourselves the moment you decided I was still the desperate girl who'd crawl for approval. They stared at me, disbelief, guilt, maybe shame. The same emotions I'd once felt sitting at this very table, waiting for their acceptance. Funny how tables turn. Literally. My mother whispered, you can't destroy your own blood. I'm not destroying anyone, I said softly. I'm just closing accounts. I slid the folder closer to her. You might want to look at the last page. Her fingers trembled as she flipped through. At the bottom was a single notice. Acquisition approval. Gray Media assumes full ownership of Grayline Creative. She froze. You bought it. I did, I said. 2 days ago. At auction. My brother's mouth fell open. That's impossible. You wouldn't. I would, I interrupted. And I did. For a moment no one moved. The rain grew louder, drowning the tiny sounds of their breathing. My mother's eyes filled, but not with tears, with rage. You planned this, she whispered. From the beginning. No, I said. I planned to survive. The rest happened naturally. My brother shoved his chair back. You think you've won something? You'll regret this. You'll be alone. I stood slowly. I've been alone for years, Daniel. The difference is now I'm not afraid of it. He stared at me, searching for guilt, for some crack of weakness. He didn't find it. The power flickered once. Thunder rolled outside. In that flash of light I saw all of us reflected in the window. Him furious, her broken, and me, still. I realized then that revenge doesn't look like fire. It looks like quiet recognition. The moment your enemies realize you don't need their forgiveness anymore. My mother's voice came out barely above a whisper. What do you want from us? Nothing, I said. That's the point. I gathered my folder, my coat, and my calm. As I walked to the door she called after me. You're your father's daughter, she said bitterly. Always self-righteous. I turned slightly. He believed in me. You didn't. That's why you can't recognize me now. Then I opened the door. The rain met me like an old friend, cold, cleansing. Street lights blurred against the windshield as I got into my car. Inside my hands trembled, not from fear but from the release of years of restraint. I sat there watching the house fade in the rearview mirror. Some part of me thought she'd come running out, the way mothers do in stories. But she didn't. She just stood behind the curtain watching, motionless. Good. Let her watch. Because for once she was seeing who I really was. Not the daughter who begged for love, but the woman who outgrew her silence. Halfway home the rain lightened. I pulled over near the old diner where I used to work night shifts. Through the fogged glass I saw the same flickering sign, the same couple sitting in the corner booth. The past unchanged. I ordered coffee to go, a quiet victory ritual. The waitress, an older woman with kind eyes, smiled. Late night, she asked. I nodded. Just tying up loose ends. She chuckled. Those are the best nights. The ones where you finally stop explaining yourself. Her words hit harder than she knew. When I stepped back into the cool air, the rain had stopped entirely. The street glistened under the lamps and the world felt reset. As I drove home I thought about the folder left behind on that dining table. By morning they'd realize exactly what it meant. That every asset, every account, every illusion of control was now mine. And yet that wasn't the victory. The real win was quieter. I had sat at their table, eaten their food, listened to their excuses, and left without raising my voice. Silence had spoken louder than any revenge ever could. And they heard every word. They heard every word, even in the silence that followed. For days I didn't hear from them. No calls. No messages. No apologies. Just stillness. The kind that comes after an earthquake when people are too afraid to open their doors and see what's left standing. It was enough for me. Or at least I thought it was. Then the letter came. It arrived 3 days later in a plain white envelope without a return address. The handwriting was familiar, steady, elegant, rehearsed. My mother had always written like someone performing perfection. I opened it carefully, already knowing what I'd find. Lena, you've made your point. Congratulations. I hope you're proud. You've embarrassed your own family for the world to see. Your father would be heartbroken if he saw what you've become. The next lines blurred slightly as I read. We're moving out of the house. The bank is taking it. Your brother's gone to stay with a friend. I'll manage somehow. Always do. I just hope you remember one day that blood doesn't wash off even when you try. No signature. No love. Just the familiar sting of guilt disguised as grace. I folded the letter back into the envelope and placed it on my desk. Then for the first time in years I didn't cry. That evening I drove out toward the coast. The ocean had always been my refuge. Wide, honest, unchangeable. The waves rolled in heavy under a gray sky, and the wind smelled like salt and closure. I sat on a wooden bench overlooking the water, letting the cold air sting my cheeks. Somewhere out there my mother was packing boxes, my brother was hiding from calls, and the empire they'd built on manipulation was collapsing. But I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt done. A soft drizzle began. I pulled my coat tighter and let my thoughts drift to my father, the quiet man who believed in me when no one else did. He used to say, "Don't teach people with anger, Lena. Teach them with consequence." At the time I didn't understand what he meant. Now I did. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about consequence, letting them taste the silence they once forced on me. And as the waves crashed below I whispered, "They finally heard me, Dad." The next morning I walked into my office earlier than usual. Clara greeted me with her usual smile. "Good morning, Miss Gray. There's someone waiting in your conference room." "Who?" She hesitated. "Your brother." I paused for a long moment before answering. "Send him in." When he entered he looked nothing like the man I'd seen at that dinner. His confidence was gone, replaced by exhaustion. He carried a folder, thin, worn, a far cry from the arrogance he used to wear like cologne. "Lena," he said quietly, "I need your help." For a moment I just studied him, the slump of his shoulders, the flicker of shame behind his eyes. He looked like a man finally learning humility the hard way. "What kind of help?" I asked. "I want to start over," he said. "Different business, smaller. I know I messed up. I don't have the means anymore. No one will work with me." I waited, letting his words hang in the air. There was no anger in me now, only clarity. "Why come to me?" I asked softly. "Because you're the only one left who knows how to build something real." That line, it cut deeper than I expected. For years he'd said the opposite. Now it sounded like confession. I leaned back in my chair. "You know," I said, 5 years ago I asked you to invest in my first project. You laughed. You told me to get a real job." He nodded slowly. "I remember. And now you're asking for mine." He didn't speak. He didn't have to. His silence said everything. I exhaled long and steady. "All right," I said. "I'll help you, but not like before." He frowned. "What do you mean?" "You'll work under me," I said simply. "Gray Media needs a junior project coordinator. It's not glamorous, but it's honest." He stared, disbelief flickering across his face. "You're offering me a job?" I nodded. "If you want a fresh start, earn it the way I did, from the bottom." For a moment he just looked at me. Then quietly he said, "I'll take it." That day I watched him sign his employment form. It wasn't vengeance, it was symmetry. The brother who once mocked me for working late now clocked in under my schedule. Life had a way of balancing its books even without my help. Clara later asked, Are you sure about this? I'm sure, I said. Some lessons are best learned up close. Weeks passed. He arrived early, left late, rarely spoke. He avoided my gaze in meetings, but I noticed small changes. The humility in how he asked questions, the quiet respect when he handled clients. For the first time in our lives, we weren't enemies. We were just two people rebuilding, on opposite sides of the same truth. As for my mother, she never called again. But I heard things. She'd sold the house, moved into a smaller place near the outskirts. Neighbors said she spent most of her days tending to her garden. The same garden she once made me weed while she scolded me for dreaming too big. One Saturday I drove by her new house. Not to confront, just to see. The gate was open. She was kneeling in the dirt, pruning a bush. When she saw me, she froze. Then slowly she stood, brushing soil off her hands. For a moment we just stared at each other, two women shaped by silence. You look well, she said at last. So do you. I heard your brother's working for you. He is. She nodded once. Good. Maybe he'll learn discipline. That sentence, simple as it was, felt like the closest she'd ever come to saying you were right. We stood there a while longer. Then she said, I've been thinking a lot lately. About the things I said to you. The things I didn't say. I didn't move. And her eyes softened. You were never the problem, Lena. I just didn't want to admit it. The wind moved gently between us, carrying the scent of fresh earth. I could have said 1,000 things in that moment. But instead I just said, I know. And that was enough. That night I sat by my window with a cup of tea and watched the city lights shimmer below. The quiet no longer felt heavy. It felt earned. My phone buzzed with a new email notification. It was from one of my newest clients, a women's foundation that sponsored young entrepreneurs. They wanted me to lead a mentorship program for women starting from nothing. I smiled, reading their proposal. It felt right, to use what I'd built not to punish anymore but to guide. The revenge was over. The lesson had been taught. Now it was time to teach something better. A month later we held the first mentorship session at Gray Media. The room filled with young women, nervous, eager, hungry to prove themselves. I told them my story not in anger but in truth. How I built from rejection. How silence became strength. And how forgiveness, when earned, can be the sharpest form of power. When the session ended, one of the women approached me. She couldn't have been more than 25. Ms. Gray, she said, how did you keep going when no one believed in you? I smiled. Because one day I decided their silence wasn't proof of my failure. It was fear of my potential. Her eyes lit up and I saw in her what I once was, determined, bruised, but unbroken. That evening as I left the office, the sun dipped low, painting everything gold. I paused at the door and looked back. My brother was still at his desk, working quietly. He looked up briefly and met my eyes. There was no tension anymore, just understanding. We didn't need to speak. Some lessons don't need words. Driving home I took the long route by the coast. The same ocean stretched before me, calm, endless, familiar. I rolled down the window, letting the breeze fill the car. It wasn't victory I felt. It was peace. The kind you only find after you stop seeking approval, after you stop waiting for an apology that will never come. I thought about everything, the phone calls, the betrayals, the silence, the dinner, the letter. Every chapter had built me into this moment. And as the horizon darkened, I whispered the only words that felt true. I didn't destroy them. I just taught them what they taught me, how it feels to be unheard. The waves crashed softly against the shore, steady and rhythmic. I parked by the railing, turned off the engine and just listened. For the first time in my life, silence didn't mean being forgotten. It meant I'd finally been understood. And that, I realized, was the lesson they paid for. Sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't making them suffer. It's making them watch you live without needing them. If this story moved you, hit subscribe and join our growing circle of women who've turned pain into power. Tell me in the comments, have you ever stayed silent and let success speak for you?